Hi, this is Craig from Third Floor Wars, and you're listening to Tale of the Manticore.
The following podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Tale of the Manticore, Season 3. Like the creature from which it takes its name, Tale of the Manticore is a mashup, a crossbreeding between two different species of storytelling. Here you will find the unpredictability of old-school paper and dice games with the storycraft of a dark fantasy novel. No character is sacred, and none will be spared if the dice decide their fate is at hand. According to lore, the tail of a manticore is barbed with cruel iron spikes. There will be much pain in the days ahead. Last time, on Tale of the Manticore. In the previous chapter, Achillea meets Tentir, Direni's younger brother. He has, for all intents and purposes, run away in order to accompany his sibling on his mission, escorting Achillea to the Northlands. The party, now 5 strong, travel until they reach one of their tribe's sentry stations, where they plan to stop for the night. The elf who lives there, keeping watch over the surrounding land, is named Berend. Berend tells his companions that the orcs are acting strangely and are moving in numbers. He is not sure what this behavior means, but it is unusual. After spending the night in his treetop watchtower, the companions bid Berend farewell and continue on their way north. The day passes without serious incident, but when night comes, it brings along with it new danger. Before I advance the story and get into a scene I believe has the potential to turn deadly, there's a bit of housekeeping to take care of. Since she's of the magic user class, Achillea must go 10 episodes before leveling up, unlike Cord, who needs only 9. But here we are at the 10th, and so it's time to take this half-elf to level 2. To begin, new hit points. On a d4, a 3. Very good. Her new maximum is 7. Unlike Cord, the non-magical members of the party get the chance, at each level startup, for stat increases. Here's how my house rule works. For each ability score, I roll a d6. On a 6, that stat goes up by 1 point. A while back, a listener did the math for me, and so I now know that there's a 66% chance for a single stat raise, and a 33% chance to get 2. I can't recall if I ever got 3, but it's very rare. Anyway, let's get to it. Will Achillea's strength increase? On a d6, I've got a 5. No change. How about intelligence? A 2. Wisdom? A 6. You know, that tracks. I mean, over the past 11 days, this young woman has seen a lot. How could she not be changed by it? Her 10 in this stat goes to 11. Dexterity is next. Another 6. Wow, how great is that? Her 14 becomes 15. Now, neither of these increases will affect the game mechanically, but they're nice all the same, and they might turn into bonuses down the road. Constitution. A 1. And finally, Charisma. A 4. Of course, there's still one more element to this level up, and it's one of my favorite things to roll for. Achillea will get a new first level spell. Rolling on my table. A 6. What's that? Oh, this is interesting. She has acquired the spell Message, which allows her to secretly whisper to another person within 60 feet plus 10 feet per level. It's not glamorous, but it could be useful in the right situation. Now, Achillea won't be able to memorize this spell before the upcoming encounter. She needs to meditate before she can do that. However, she won't need to write the spell into her spellbook. The reason is, it was already there. In fact, Achillea's spellbook is full of spells. She just can't understand most of them. Dramatis Personae. Achillea. 2 years ago. That winter was the worst she had ever seen. Even Aldve, who rarely complained, said that it was exceptionally harsh. The two of them had not adequately prepared for it, and so supplies were short. The worst part was that, for days on end, Achillea and her master were forced to spend all their waking hours indoors, while Cord diligently gathered firewood outside, unbothered by the low temperatures. By midwinter, after a full 3 weeks of being cooped up together, Aldve apparently came to a decision.
"It is a little earlier than I'd expected. Perhaps you are ready,"
he said, mysteriously.
Ready for what, Vapi?
Achillea had been busy writing a poem, while daydreaming and looking out the window at their snow-covered valley.
"Put that aside and come sit with me by the fire."
Achillea obeyed. She was stuck on the third stanza, and besides, there was something about Aldve's voice that made her think something momentous was about to take place. She sat in her chair by the hearth, while Aldve disappeared into their shared bedroom for a moment. She heard him pull a volume from his bookshelf before he came back into the living room and took his seat with a little groan of effort, as he always did. In addition to a book, he held a pot of ink and a special-looking quill. It was jet black, with a bright red stripe across one edge of the feather. He handed her the book. It was fairly small, and bound in dark shagreen with a burnished brass clasp.
"This is for you,"
said Aldve.
What's inside?
Asked Achillea, filling with hope. She'd been wondering when this moment would come.
"Open it and see,"
he replied. Achillea's fingers were trembling a little when she did. She held her breath and lifted the cover. She stared down at the first page and her brow knit. She turned the page. Then the next. Then the next.
It's blank,
she said, nonplussed.
"Not for long, Beckme.
Aldve was smiling. There was a subtle confidence in his voice.
Not for long. Take the quill, take the ink."
But I don't know how to write the arcane,
said Achillea doubtfully.
"You have only forgotten, Beckme. But your soul knows. You just need to remember."
I don't understand. How could I have forgotten something I had never learned?
The soul is eternal, Achillea. You and I, and all those who can wield the art, have lived 1,000 lives before this one.
But I don't know how to remember.
I will help you.
Aldve proceeded to lead Achillea into, by far, the deepest meditative trance she had ever entered. He guided her down and down and down, into the well of her mind, and lower still. When he decided that she was ready, he told her to begin writing, and she did. While her eyes stared blankly forward, seeing nothing, her hand moved on its own, dipping the quill and writing the complicated runes and sigils of the language of magic. It took her all day, but eventually she finished, and Aldve brought her gently out of the trance. Achillea blinked. She looked out the window and realized from the quality of light that hours had passed. Looking back at the book in her hands, she saw it was now bursting with text. She blinked again, bit her lip, and said,
I cannot read a single word of this.
Aldve smiled at her, pride now written across his features as surely as the new words on the page of Achillea's book.
That is well, and all is as it should be, my dear,
he said.
To understand what you have written, to hear the voice of your soul, and to remember, this part will take time.
Looks like I finally found a good use for my mythic event meaning, negligence, weather. Now that it's spent, I need to roll up a new one. Here we go. 90 and 30. What does that give me? Let's see. Oh, okay. That's kind of neat. Chapter 10. Part 1. Day 11. Twilight. Mythic event meaning. Failure, possessions. Party status. Achillea, 7 out of 7 hit points. Cord, 11 out of 11. Dureni, 6 of 6. Tentir, 6 of 6. Supplies. The companions have 14 portions of food and 9 of water. Spells available. Achillea has memorized Shrink. Cord can cast Entangle and Locate plants and animals. A half moon, the color of bone, hung in the star-dusted sky. The companions were footsore and ready to stop for the evening by the time they arrived at a rise with a single, sad-looking dogwood tree marking the top. Ahead, they could hear the cawing of crows, lots of them, though they could not see any. Robin adjusted her grip in Achillea's hair at the sound.
Crows mock the dead,
said Durrani, giving a signal for the group to slow down and approach the hilltop with caution. When they reached it and looked into the vale beyond, they saw a great patch of blackness in the middle of a landscape of otherwise pale scrub and grass. There were shapes in that patch of blackness, unidentifiable lumps and mounds. Some parts of the black patch seemed to ripple and shift in the moonlight. Suddenly, with a cacophony of squawking and flapping wings, a cloud of black burst up and into the air. Hundreds of crows took to wing, flying away in every direction. Then one, and another of the many lumpy shapes rose up to stand among the others, which remained motionless on the ground.
"Look,"
said Tentir.
Orcs!
Warned Durrani. He was right. The companions could now see what before had been hidden under a blanket of scavenging birds. There were armored bodies all over the ground, perhaps 24 of them. The telltale dull glint of metal in the low light showed where combatants had fallen or had dropped their weapons. Clearly, there had been a great battle here. The 4 bulky shapes that had risen to their feet must be the sole survivors, or else they had come into the aftermath of this field of battle to loot the dead. Whichever was the case, the orcs had spotted them. One raised a heavy spear in the air and barked commands at the other 3. They responded immediately, with 2 of them knocking arrows to bows.
entering combat.
In Chapter 9, I rolled up a wandering encounter with some orcs that was supposed to take place at night. I also determined that neither side would be surprised. Since the party has been traveling through sparsely wooded hills, I figured visibility would be quite good, and so I decided that it would make sense for the 2 sides to discover each other's existence at a range of 70 feet. As the PCs guessed, these orcs are the survivors of a recent battle. They were looking to their wounds and looting the bodies of friend and foe alike when Achillea's group came upon them. Because they were recently in a fight, when I roll up their hit points, I won't apply my usual min-out rule. Some of them might be badly hurt and under the half-max threshold. Another break from my usual practice is that I'm going to roll for their hit points individually. Normally I'd roll once and apply that number to all enemies, but this is a special case. Let's see. Orcs get a D8 for hit points. Rolling 4 times. 4, 4, 6, 5. Okay, the leader with the spear will have 6 hit points. The 2 archers will have 4 apiece, and the last one, wielding a broadsword, 5. They all have the same armor class of 14 for studded leather and shield, or, for the archers, chainmail. Their tactic will be to put bowfire on the companions, while the 2 melee fighters curve around the flanks to come in with a pincer movement. I think that's enough information to get started, so let's begin. Round 1. Initiative. The party. 6. The orcs. A 1. Wow, that is decisive. Clearly the orcs were slow to organize. Before they can get very far, the elven brothers loose arrows in their direction. I'll say that Durrani is aiming at the leader, while Tentir is hoping to take out one of the archers. Each has a +1 to hit with their bows due to their high dexterity scores, so they need to roll a 13 or better. Durrani fires. An 11 misses. And Tentir lets his shaft fly. A 12 just misses. That's too bad, but it's still early in the fight, and the PCs have the advantage of high ground. Cord and Achillea will not take an action this round, so it's the orcs' turn. The leader and the sword wielder both run a distance of 30 feet, curling around to the companions' flanks, as mentioned earlier. The 2 archers return fire, 1 arrow for each of the elven brothers. They'll need a 15 to hit. The one aiming for Durrani. A 6 means the arrow falls short. And 1 more for Tentir. 18! Oh no, that's a hit. Tentir could possibly die right here if the arrow does max damage. How much will he take? On a d6. A 2. That could have been much worse, but that first round definitely goes to the orcs. It is round 2. Initiative. The party. A 6 again. The orcs. A 2. I think the ground must be deceptively steep, and the charging orcs lose their momentum when they hit the incline. Winning this initiative is very good luck for the PCs, because it allows them to take good advantage of the terrain. They'll pull well back of the hill's crest and break line of sight with the orcish archers. Now neither side can fire upon the other. However, I'm going to allow the PCs to automatically win the initiative next round when the 2 melee orcs come into view. It makes sense to me that they'll assume the companions are fleeing. Orcs aren't especially smart. Therefore, we jump to Round 3, Initiative. The party automatically wins, the orcs automatically lose. As soon as the 2 orcs come into view, both Dureni and Tentir let fly. Dureni's roll. A 14 hits. The leader will take 3 points of damage. He's down to half. Can Tentir score hit 2? A 13 or better is required. The roll. A 5. The orc gets his shield up in time to block the shaft. Achillea will throw one of her daggers. She needs a 14 or better. A 1. Oh no, that's a critical fumble. She throws her knife, but it strikes the lead orc's shield, and the brute steps on it as he charges forward. His iron-shod boot dents the knife, ruining it. Additionally, for her failure, Achillea will lose her next turn. Cord, surprising everyone, possibly even himself, reaches out his free hand and casts the spell Entangle. The dogwood tree responds. Its branches become supple, whip-like appendages that snake out to wrap around the sword-wielding orc's wrist and ankle. A save is allowed to cut himself free, but even if he makes it, his movement will be slowed. And it's no easy save. A 16 or better is needed. The roll. A 19! Wow. The orc savagely slashes at the attacking branches and wades through the roots and grasses that try to grab his legs. This is one tough orc. We are on to round 4. Initiative. The party. A 6! That's 3 in a row for the PCs. The orcs. A 1. I guess the Entangle spell was not only a physical deterrent, but a real spectacle. I'll allow Tentir to fire his bow once more before the sword wielder can reach him. He needs a 13. A 3. No good. I think the younger elf is just as shocked by Cord's magic as the orc, and his shot goes wild. Dureni and Cord now both face off against the leader orc. Dureni needs a 14 to hit with his short sword, which he drew after casting his bow to the ground. His roll. 19. Sweet. The blade does a d6 of damage. A 4. It's a clean thrust up and into the monster's throat that brings it crashing down, gurgling out its last breath. Cord is not positioned to be able to engage the other orc, who's delayed but not held by the Entangle spell, and Achillea has lost her turn. So we are on to round 5. Initiative. The party. A 3. Well, those 6s couldn't last forever, right? The orcs. A 2. Makes sense. The Entangle spell is still in effect. Achillea now has her turn back, but it doesn't make any difference. She gets out of the way to let the fighters handle the orc. It's 3 on 1. Tentir, sword now in hand, tries to duplicate his brother's success. A 4 is not even close, and his sword is easily blocked by the orc's shield. Cord swings his woodman's axe, needing a 14. A 6 is a miss. Dureni will hopefully have better luck. Oh no, a 1! The orc feints, then kicks the elf in the groin, dropping him to the ground like a sack of grain. Dureni will miss his next turn. Now the orc can take a proper attack, a high-low, to see who he targets. High is Tentir on a d20. High, that's unfortunate. Tentir's armor class is a 15 though. He's not easy to hit. Ha! Another 1! That's the 3rd crit fail of this battle. The orc overreaches with his blade, and Tentir takes the opportunity to drop the pommel of his sword on its hand. It howls in pain as it drops the weapon. Before we go on, I need to see if the archers will have followed and caught up by now. High-low to see if they show up this round or next. High will mean this round. A 12. The tide turns once again, and they do, as the orcish archers fire into melee, unconcerned that their companion is vulnerable should they miss. Actually, I need to make a quick ruling for this kind of thing. What's realistic? On a miss, I'll say there's a 1 in 6 chance for each ally in the fight for friendly fire to happen. This rule will apply to PCs and enemies alike going forward. Targets will be random. The first shoots at Cord and needs a 14 or better. A 17 hits. An arrow thunks into Cord's torso for 2 points. The second archer targets Dureni. A 10, thankfully, will miss. Is there friendly fire? A 1 on a d6 means there will be. Rolling. Oh, a 1, and the sword wielder is shot by his own ally for just 1 point. The arrow clips his ear. That's the end of round 5, so we are on to round 6. Initiative. The party. 2. The orcs. 1. The PCs win it by the skin of their teeth. Let's hope they can score some hits. Tentier's blade flashes out. A 9 means the orc deflects the blow with his shield once again. Cord strikes with his axe. A 14 is just enough. The axe will do a d6 of damage. Rolling. 6 points. Cord splits the orc's head like a piece of firewood, and the brute goes down. That leaves Tentier free to attack the archers. They aren't so far away, so he can get to them this round. His short sword sings out. A 19. Chainmail is shorn as the elven blade inflicts. Oh wow, 6 points of damage. The orc is completely disemboweled, and loops of blue guts spill out onto the ground before the creature falls over, dead. It's the sole remaining orc's turn, and there's a very good chance it'll run. Orcs have a morale score of 8, but given the circumstances, I'm reducing that to 5. That amount or more on a 2d6 means it will flee. Rolling. An 8. Even without the modifier, the orc has lost its taste for this battle. It turns and runs. Combat is essentially over, but I'm going to allow Tentier one chance to grab his bow from the ground nearby and send a missile after this orc as it tries to get away. It's a clear shot, so the target number remains the same. A 14 or better will hit. Haha, a 15. Will it be enough to make the kill? There's a 50-50 chance since the monster has 4 hit points. Rolling a d6 for damage. A 5. The arrow streaks from the elf's bow and slams into the orc's back, punching through chainmail and rupturing one of its lungs. The orc falls on its face, and by the time the companions have run down to give it a coup de grace, it has already drowned in its own blood. I used up my event meaning during that combat to say that one of Achillea's daggers was ruined when the lead orc stepped on it, so it looks like I'll need a new one. Rolling. 14 and 55. Okay, got it. Chapter 10, Part 2, Day 11, Twilight. Mythic event meaning: abandon, suffering. Party status: Achillea, 7 out of 7 hit points. Cord, 9 of 11. Dureni, 6 of 6. Tentier, 4 of 6. Supplies: the companions have 14 portions of food and 9 of water. Spells available: Achillea has memorized Shrink. Cord can cast Locate Plants and Animals. Once Dureni had confirmed that Tentier had not been badly hurt by the orcish arrow, he turned to Cord and said,
You are truly a marvel, my friend. I had no idea you could command nature.
There was no accusation in his tone. Dureni was smiling broadly. From his perspective, the battle had been extremely successful. He and Tentier conducted a quick check of the orcish corpse nearby. Achillea held Cord back for a moment before following. The construct had an arrow sticking out of his chest, but it hadn't gone deep. Achillea wiggled it free and threw it on the ground.
A marvel indeed,
She said.
Have you always been able to do that, Cord?
The wooden man twisted his body back and forth, indicating that he had not. Almost every day since leaving home, Achillea had thought about the nature of identity, mostly her own, but she hadn't considered. Perhaps it was a more fluid thing than she had thought. She touched the dent where the arrow had come free.
Well, that's going to leave a mark.
She muttered. Then she walked back up the incline to where her knife had bounced off the orc's shield and tutted her tongue.
It's broken.
She said.
Come on and help me find a new one.
As they descended the slope, a flutter of wings from behind signaled that Robin had left the safety of the dogwood branches. The little stuffed bird landed on Cord's head and peeped. By the time they joined Dureni and Tentir, twilight was turning to night, and Achillea's dark vision was beginning to take over. She regarded the tangle of armor, weapons, and orc flesh littering the ground in grayscale. She had never seen death like this before, but she found that she was not frightened and set about searching for a suitable replacement dagger. After a few minutes, she still hadn't found one, but Tentir must have discovered something of interest, for he suddenly called out,
Dureni, come over here and look at this!
Thanks very much for listening to Tale of the Manticore. If you're enjoying the show and would like to help to support it, there are lots of ways to do so. You can recommend the show online or to friends. You can like and repost episode announcements on social media. You can pick up one of my offerings on DriveThruRPG. You can purchase a Tale of the Manticore t-shirt at www.beararts.store. And finally, you can rate or review the show on your podcatcher of choice. I'm grateful for all of your kind support. At this time, let's hear another listener review. This one was left by Humanoid Clay on Apple Podcasts. Humanoid Clay writes, very recent listener here. Came here from a recommendation from another TTRPG podcast. I've been loving listening to Achillea's story in Zacia, and I'm drawn to Tale of the Manticore's unique and compelling style of storytelling. Although this is the first solo-player TTRPG podcast I've encountered, I can tell by the novel-like prose and clever through lines made to blend role results into the story that this podcast is something special. I'll certainly continue to follow along as the story is further stitched together. Thanks very much, Humanoid Clay. There's so much in your review that inspires me. I love that you found the show via another pod. The community between creators in the RPG space is so positive and so important. I'm equally delighted that Tale of the Manticore is your first solo play pod. Again, it means a lot to me when I see that the show is spreading beyond the boundaries of the solo play niche. Finally, I'm thrilled to hear that you are enjoying the show and Achillea's story. If you keep listening, I'll keep stitching dice rolls together. Thanks again for the review. This episode has a bunch of voice talent in it. The whole Tumbledye team is back together this go-around. Playing Aldve Muog in a flashback is the amazing Andrew Fling. Back in their respective roles of Dureni and Tentir, we've got Kyle and Kevin Berenger. Finally, playing Orc number 3 is newcomer Moravai. My thanks to all 4 of you, and welcome to the cast, Moravai. For those curious to learn a bit more about Totem, I keep a blog where I post all kinds of show and RPG related stuff, like art, maps, tables, crafts, and show notes. You can find it at taleofthemanticore.blogspot.com. To get in touch with me, I'm at ManticoreTale on X, Tale of the Manticore Podcast on Instagram, or taleofthemanticore@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. The adventure will continue on the next episode of Tale of the Manticore, the story where chaos rolls.